Imagine you're a 16-year-old girl preparing for another ordinary workday just like hundreds of others before. You hug your mother goodbye, step down to your familiar lifeguard chair by the pond, and just 5 minutes later, you vanish from the face of the earth as if you never existed. This is exactly what happened to Molly Bish on that fateful morning of June 27, 2000 in Warren, Massachusetts. But what really happened during those 5 minutes? Why would a smart, responsible girl leave all her personal belongings neatly arranged and then disappear without a trace? Was the mysterious man with a mustache sitting in the white car that Molly's mother saw the day before the perpetrator? And why did it take 3 years to find her remains, hidden deep in the woods 5 miles from the scene? For 25 years, the Bish family has lived with these torturous questions. They have witnessed dozens of suspects being investigated, from Rodney Stanger, a man with a violent criminal record, to Gerald Battistoni, someone who had attacked a woman at the very location where Molly's body was found, to Frank Sumner Sr., the only official person of interest named despite being deceased. Nearly 8,000 tips have been reported. 267 pieces of physical evidence remain carefully preserved, and modern DNA technology continues to open new possibilities. But who really took Molly Bish's life? Is the killer still living free out there? Will the Bish family someday find the answers they've yearned for over more than a quarter of a century? No matter how long the wait may be, no matter how treacherous the path to justice becomes, one thing is certain: the truth will always be revealed, and justice will ultimately be served. On the morning of June 27, 2000, sunlight bathed the small town of Warren, Massachusetts, just like any other ordinary summer morning. However, this would be a day that a family would never be able to forget, a day that would haunt a community for the next 25 years. In the cozy house on the small dirt road, Molly Ann Bish was preparing for her 8th day of work as a lifeguard at Commons Pond. The 16-year-old with golden blonde hair and crystal clear blue eyes had no idea that this would be the last time she would wake up in the safety of her own home. Molly was no ordinary girl. She was an honor student, an outstanding school athlete who had just completed her junior year of high school with admirable achievements. The final moment of family peace occurred as Molly was playing with her 11-month-old niece, Michaela, Heather's daughter. Molly's pure laughter rang throughout the house as she lifted the baby up high. Those laughs would forever echo in the Bish family's memories like a final song of happiness. Molly Bish, the diligent mother, reminded her daughter with the familiar tone of a mother worried her child would be late for work. At 9:50 a.m., the family car stopped in front of the Extra Mart convenience store. This was Molly's usual stop to buy drinks for her work shift. The store's security camera captured the final images of Molly Bish while she was still alive, a young girl smiling brightly, buying a simple bottle of water with a smile still blooming on her lips. No one could have imagined that this would be the final proof that Molly was still safe. 6 minutes later, mother and daughter stopped by the Warren police station to pick up the radio that Molly needed for her lifeguard duties. The officers on duty still remember that moment. Molly waved at them with her characteristic friendly attitude, her voice bright and cheerful as she said thank you. This was the last time neutral witnesses saw Molly in a normal state. At 9:58 a.m., the car arrived at Commons Pond, a small recreational area located in the center of Warren. Commons Pond wasn't a major tourist destination, just a small pond surrounded by a sandy beach and a few picnic tables, where local families often came for children to learn to swim and play. Molly Bish noticed a sand truck unloading sand for the beach. These workers would later become key witnesses in the investigation. The final farewell moment between mother and daughter took place normally, just like thousands of times before. Molly hugged her mother, said a sweet goodbye, and stepped out of the car with her familiar lifeguard equipment. Molly Bish drove away with peace of mind, completely unaware that she had just seen her daughter for the last time. What happened in the next 5 minutes remains a mystery that has baffled investigators for 25 years. At 10:03 a.m., the first families arriving for swimming lessons discovered something unusual. There was no lifeguard at the station. The lifeguard chair had been set up neatly. The water bottle Molly had just bought was still intact. Her flip-flops were placed tidily next to the chair, and the first aid kit had been opened as if Molly was preparing for a normal day of work. However, Molly Bish had vanished without a trace. In just 5 minutes, a young girl full of life had disappeared from the face of the earth as if she had never existed. The scene showed no signs of struggle, no cries for help, nothing to indicate what had happened to that 16-year-old girl. The initial response from the community and authorities would become one of the biggest mistakes in Massachusetts investigation history. At 11:30 a.m., when Warren police were notified of Molly's disappearance, their initial attitude was to treat this as a typical teenage runaway case. They assumed that a 16-year-old girl might have decided to skip work to hang out with friends, or simply didn't want to work that day. This delay would become the eternal torment of the Bish family and an expensive lesson for the entire law enforcement system. 3 hours passed, 3 extremely precious hours in searching for a missing person, before police decided to contact the family. At 1 p.m., the telephone in the Bish house rang with news that no family wants to hear. Molly Bish picked up the phone and heard the serious voice from the other end announcing that her daughter was missing. The mother's heart seemed to stop beating in that moment. The world around her seemed to collapse in just a few seconds. The cold statistics that Heather Bish would later recall with ultimate pain were that 76% of children abducted by strangers would be killed within the first 3 hours. 3 hours had passed, and the Bish family could only pray that their daughter was not part of that terrifying statistic. News of Molly's disappearance spread throughout Warren like wildfire. Within a few hours, the entire small town knew the story of the young girl who had mysteriously vanished from her workplace. This was the beginning of one of the most haunting cases in Massachusetts history, a story that would leave deep marks not only on the victim's family, but also on an entire community and investigators who would dedicate their careers to seeking the truth. On the afternoon of June 27, 2000, Commons Pond became the focal point of the largest and most expensive search in Massachusetts history. The scene at this small area resembled a Hollywood action movie. State police helicopters circling overhead with tense, roaring sounds, professional dive teams searching every inch under the pond bottom with the most modern equipment, and hundreds of volunteers pouring in from everywhere to scour every bush, every hidden corner around the area. The Bish family's desperation was most clearly demonstrated through the actions of John Bish Jr., Molly's brother. Unable to stand watching the professional team's work, he recklessly jumped into the water, diving as deep as possible with nothing but his bare hands and the hope of finding his sister. Adrenaline and family love drove him to exhaustion. Each time he surfaced was another moment of shattered hope. That scene brought witnesses to tears, a young brother fighting against time and fate to save the sister he loved. But despite those desperate efforts, the pond remained silent, revealing no secrets about Molly's fate. While the large-scale search was underway, investigators began piecing together the first fragments of this mystery through Molly Bish's testimony. When asked about any unusual incidents in recent days, the grieving mother recalled a detail that initially seemed unimportant, but now became a crucial clue. On June 26th, just one day before Molly disappeared, when Molly was dropping her daughter off at Commons Pond as usual, she noticed something unusual. A strange man was sitting in a white sedan, parked in a position where he could clearly observe Molly's work area. What made Molly uncomfortable wasn't just this man's presence, but the way he was watching. The man had distinctive salt and pepper gray hair, very thick and well-groomed, with a face bearing a thick mustache in classic style. But what Molly remembered most deeply was the way he smoked, continuous and seemingly tense gestures, as if he was waiting for something. His eyes continuously followed Molly as she prepared for her workday, a type of observation that seemed too focused for an ordinary passerby. Molly Bish told investigators that she had felt an uneasy feeling when she saw this man, a mother's intuition that she would later regret not trusting more. However, at that time, she only thought this was a random passerby and took no further action. On June 27th, when bringing Molly to work for the last time, Maggie didn't see the mysterious man or any white car in the area. This initially made her feel relieved, thinking that the man from the day before was just a random coincidence. However, another witness provided important information that changed the entire direction of the investigation. A construction worker working near the area reported that he had seen a man matching Magi's description just minutes before Molly arrived at work. This meant that the potential perpetrator was present at the scene almost exactly when Molly appeared, showing this was not a chance encounter. Additionally, another local witness reported seeing a similar car parked at Mount Pleasant Cemetery, not far from Commons Pond, and connected to the pond by a forest trail. This detail was very important because it indicated that the mysterious man might have been scouting the area and learning about different access routes, showing premeditation. With this information, police decided to create a suspect profile. They worked with a professional forensic artist to recreate an image based on Molly Bish's detailed description. This process was very meticulous, with Magi having to recall every line on the mysterious man's face. The result was a composite sketch of a middle-aged man with thick mustache, characteristic thick salt and pepper gray hair. The face had angular features, deep-set eyes, and a stern expression that was somewhat frightening. This was not the face of a friend or friendly neighbor, but the image of someone who might be harboring bad intentions. When the sketch was widely released to the media, the public's reaction was swift and intense. The district attorney at the time, with a serious expression before the cameras, confidently declared that this was a remarkable and very distinctive sketch, believing it would be very helpful to the investigation. Within hours of the sketch's release, the police hotline began ringing continuously. Hundreds of calls poured in from everywhere, each caller claiming they knew or had seen the man in the sketch. Any man around 50 years old, white, with a mustache and salt and pepper gray hair, became a suspect in the eyes of neighbors and acquaintances. However, the intensity of the response also created a major challenge for investigators. They had to filter through hundreds of leads, most of which ultimately led to dead ends. Many innocent men had to endure suspicion and investigation, creating stress not only for them, but also for their families. While investigators were busy pursuing these leads, the Bish family was experiencing the most painful days and nights of their lives. Every hour that passed without news of Molly felt like a blow to their hearts. Heather Bish, Molly's sister, described these early days as an endless nightmare. The family sat together, staring out the window toward Commons Pond as if the pond would somehow bring Molly back home, as if it would reveal the secret it was hiding. They held each other tightly in desperation, each secretly hoping this was just a nightmare, and they would soon wake up to find Molly safe in her bedroom. But the cruel reality was that the initial days turned into weeks, and those weeks turned into months, with still no news of Molly. The initial search focused mainly around Commons Pond and surrounding areas, based on the assumption that Molly might have drowned or had an accident nearby. Dr. Sue Myers, an anthropologist and archaeologist invited to join the investigation, provided important advice that later proved to be far-sighted. She advised investigators that they needed to expand the search area further, not just focus around the pond. Based on her research experience, if this was truly an abduction, the perpetrator would try to take the victim as far from the initial area as possible. This advice initially didn't receive much attention, as investigators still hoped to find Molly near where she disappeared. However, Dr. Myers' advice would later be proven completely correct when Molly's body was discovered 5 miles from Commons Pond. The first months of the investigation also revealed some errors in how the case was handled. The crime scene at Commons Pond wasn't protected and secured professionally from the beginning, leading to the possible loss of some important evidence. The 3-hour wait before notifying the family was also considered a major mistake, as the first hours are most crucial in searching for a missing person. Additionally, the initial attitude of treating Molly as a teenage runaway affected the intensity and direction of the investigation during those precious first hours. Investigators spent time checking whether Molly had contacted friends or had plans to go elsewhere, instead of immediately treating this as a serious matter that might involve crime. The feeling of desperation and helplessness grew in the Bish family as they realized that each passing day was another day that hope of finding Molly alive grew dimmer. They had to endure the pain of not knowing where their daughter and sister was, whether she was injured or worse. The first night that the Bish family had to sleep, not knowing where Molly was, became one of the longest nights of their lives. The house that had once been filled with laughter was now shrouded in terrifying silence. Every small sound made them hope it was the sound of Molly's footsteps coming home. 2 years had passed since Molly Bish disappeared from Cummins Pond, and the investigation seemed to have hit a dead end. Thousands of leads had been pursued, hundreds of potential suspects had been questioned, but nothing led to a real breakthrough. The Bish family lived in a painful state of limbo, not knowing whether their daughter was still alive or had passed away, not knowing if they would ever find answers. The fall of 2002 brought a fateful change to the case. On a cold October day, a hunter named Randy Brahio was walking through the Whiskey Hill Woods in Palmer, about 5 miles southwest of Commons Pond. As he moved through the thick canopy of trees, his eyes caught something unusual among the fallen dry leaves. It was a piece of navy blue fabric that appeared to have been there for quite some time, faded by weather and sunlight. But what made Brahio stop and observe more closely was the shape and size of this fabric piece. It looked like part of a bathing suit, and immediately he remembered the story of Molly Bish that all of Massachusetts had been following for the past 2 years. Brahio knew this could be an important clue, and he immediately contacted police. News of this discovery was like lightning in clear skies, bringing the first hope to the Bish family after 2 years of waiting in desperation. Massachusetts State Police immediately mobilized a team of experts to seal off and search the entire area around the discovery site. The search was conducted with the precision of surgery. Every inch of ground in the area was meticulously examined. Every leaf, every branch was carefully considered. Forensic experts used the most modern equipment to scan every nook and cranny, hoping to find additional evidence or clues about Molly's fate. 8 months after discovering the bathing suit piece on June 9, 2003, the search finally yielded results. What investigators found would forever change the Bish family's life and end the fragile hope that Molly might still be alive somewhere. Hidden deep in the forest, beneath layers of dry leaves and plant matter, they discovered scattered human bone fragments. Only 26 bone pieces remained scattered in a small area, the final traces of a young girl who had once been full of life. The identification process through dental examination confirmed the Bish family's worst fear. These were Molly's remains. This news exploded like a bomb in the Bish family's hearts. After 3 years of living in fragile hope that their daughter might still be alive somewhere, they had to face the cruel truth that Molly had been gone for a very long time. The case officially shifted from missing person to murder investigation, opening a new phase full of challenges in the search for justice. Due to natural decomposition after 3 years in the forest environment, the exact cause of Molly's death could not be determined. However, forensic experts affirmed that based on the circumstances and location where the body was found, they were certain that Molly had been killed by her abductor. Finding the body 5 miles away from Commons Pond also confirmed Dr. Sue Meyer's wise advice from 3 years earlier. This indicated that the perpetrator had a specific plan and knew how to conceal his crime by taking the victim as far from the initial area as possible. With the shift to a murder investigation, police began reviewing the entire case from a new angle. They focused on searching for those with similar criminal records in the area, especially those who matched the description of the mysterious man that Molly Bish had seen. In 2005, a Connecticut man charged with attempted kidnapping in New York was briefly placed on the investigation list. However, after thoroughly checking his alibi and finding no connecting evidence, he was removed from the suspect list. The year 2009 brought a more noteworthy new suspect, Rodney Stanger. Stanger was a man with many suspicious coincidences with the Molly Bish case. He had lived in Southbridge, Massachusetts, a small town near Warren, for over 20 years, and notably, he had moved to Florida just 1 year after Molly was killed. What made Stanger a potential suspect wasn't just the suspicious timing of his move. Through investigation, police discovered that Stanger regularly fished at Commons Pond itself, where Molly worked. He also had a habit of hunting in the forests around Palmer, including the Whiskey Hill area where Molly's body was found. Most importantly, Stanger was known to have access to a white car similar to the one Molly Bish had described when she saw the mysterious man. When investigators created a comparison photo, they noticed that Stanger had many characteristics that matched the initial description of the suspect. The investigation into Stanger became more serious when he was connected to another murder case. Crystal Morrison, Stanger's girlfriend for 20 years, had been killed, and Morrison's sister had alerted Massachusetts authorities about the potential connection to the Bish case. It didn't stop there. When Stanger was being investigated for the Molly Bish case in 2009, police also questioned him in connection with the 1993 murder of Holly Piirainen, a girl who had gone missing in Sturbridge. Notably, Bish and Piirainen were the same age in 1993. And Molly had even written a letter of hope to Piirainen's parents that year. Despite many suspicious coincidences, Stanger was never charged in either case. The lack of direct physical evidence linking him to the crimes caused the investigation to reach another dead end. In 2011, a new clue emerged from an unexpected source. A private investigator had approached the Bish family with information about Gerald Battistoni. Battistoni was a man with a serious criminal record who had been convicted of continuously assaulting a teenage girl in the early 1990s. What made Battistoni a potential suspect wasn't just his criminal record. Information from the private investigator indicated that Battistoni had once attacked a woman right in the forest where Molly's body was found. Additionally, his ex-wife had reported that he had used her white car in Warren on the exact day Molly disappeared. Battistoni also had many physical characteristics that matched the composite sketch of the mysterious man that Molly Bish had described. He had a criminal record dating back to 1980 and had been present in the area where Molly's body was discovered. When newspaper articles began identifying Battistoni as a potential suspect in the Bish and Piirainen cases, psychological pressure weighed so heavily on him that he attempted to end his life in prison. The Bish family, working with the private investigator, requested that the state perform DNA testing to compare with evidence from the scene. Massachusetts State Police sent the DNA evidence to Texas for advanced testing. However, before results could be announced, Battistoni died in November 2014 in prison, taking with him any secrets he might have known about the case. These years marked a period full of disappointment in the investigation. Each potential suspect brought new hope to the Bish family, but then ended in disappointment when insufficient evidence was found to press charges. The family had to endure continuous cycles of hope and disappointment, each leaving deeper wounds in their hearts. Heather Bish, Molly's sister, described this period as continuous emotional tsunamis attacking the family. Each time there was news about a new suspect, they would embrace hope that they would finally find answers and justice for Molly. But when each lead led to a dead end, pain and disappointment would pile on even more. Throughout this time, the Bish family not only had to face personal grief, but also had to witness how the justice system handled their daughter's case. They felt there were errors in the initial investigation, from failing to properly protect the crime scene, to focusing too much on the hypothesis that Molly might have run away during those crucial first hours. These failures not only affected the Molly Bish case, but also became expensive lessons for the entire Massachusetts law enforcement system on how to handle missing person cases, especially children and teenagers. 21 years after the fateful day at Commons Pond, the world had completely changed. Internet technology and social media had created new opportunities in the search for justice for unsolved cases. Heather Bish, now 40 years old, had made a decision she never thought she would make. joining the TikTok platform to tell her sister's story to the younger generation. For a middle-aged woman to decide to use an application primarily designed for young people was not easy. Heather had to learn how to use new technology, understand social media algorithms, and most importantly, find a way to tell her family's painful story in a way that was both authentic and accessible to millions of young users. Heather's first videos on TikTok were made with anxiety and unease. She sat in front of her phone camera, her voice trembling as she recalled the story that had haunted her family for over 2 decades. It's been 7,680 days since my sister disappeared, and I've been waiting for answers about what happened to her. She began with cold but haunting numbers. The reaction from the online community far exceeded Heather's expectations. Her videos quickly went viral, attracting millions of views and thousands of comments from users around the world. Molly Bish's story had touched the hearts of people who had never heard of this case, creating a new wave of interest and bringing hope to the family that someone out there might know something important. While Heather was using the power of social media to seek justice, investigators in Massachusetts were also pursuing new advances in forensic science. DNA technology had developed dramatically since 2003, when Molly's body was found, opening new possibilities in analyzing old evidence. June 3, 2021 marked a major turning point in the case when prosecutor Joseph Early Jr. held a press conference to announce unprecedented information in the history of the Molly Bish case investigation. For the first time in over 20 years, police had officially named a specific person of interest in the case. Francis Frank Sumner Sr., a man who had died in 2016, was identified as the main suspect in Molly Bish's murder. Sumner was no stranger to the justice system. He had a long criminal record, including serious crimes such as sexual assault and kidnapping. Born in 1945, Sumner had spent most of his life in Massachusetts, operating auto repair shops in Spencer, Leicester, and Worcester from 1960 until his death. This geographical location was very important because it placed him right in the area where Molly lived and worked. The most remarkable thing about Sumner was the stunning coincidence between his appearance and the composite sketch that police had created based on Molly Bish's description 21 years earlier. When placing Sumner's photo next to the sketch, the similarity was almost perfect, from the thick salt and pepper gray hair, thick mustache, to the facial features. The crucial clue leading to Sumner's identification came from an unexpected source. A tipster had contacted police, reporting that they had seen a white car similar to the one Molly Bish described parked at one of Sumner's auto repair shops. This detail created a direct link between the suspect and the vehicle believed to have been used in the abduction. However, identifying Sumner as a suspect also brought major challenges. He had died 5 years before being identified, and more importantly, his body had been cremated. This meant investigators could not take DNA samples directly from Sumner to compare with evidence from the crime scene. Additionally, a serious oversight in the system was discovered. Sumner's DNA had never been entered into the National CODIS database, despite his sex offense criminal record. This was a gap in the system that, if corrected earlier, might have led to solving the case years before. Facing this challenge, investigators had to find a creative solution. They decided to apply familial DNA techniques, a relatively new technology in forensics that allows identification of family relationships through genetic material comparison. Their target was Frank Sumner Jr., the deceased suspect's son. The search for Frank Sumner Jr. led Massachusetts investigators to the London Correctional Institution in Ohio, where he was serving time for aggravated robbery. This cross-state trip represented a final effort to seek evidence that could link Sumner Jr.'s father to Molly's murder. The process of collecting DNA samples from Sumner Jr. was carried out with cooperation from the Ohio prison system and forensic experts from Massachusetts. The sample was carefully transported back to Massachusetts for complex testing, comparing it with unidentified DNA found at the crime scene. While waiting for test results, the Bish family lived in a state of anxiety and worry. This could be their last chance to find answers after more than 20 years of waiting. Heather continued posting TikTok videos, sharing with her followers about this tense waiting process. Simultaneously, investigators were also working with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory in Sudbury to review all physical evidence from the case. Detective Chelsea Safford, who was assigned to the case, led the documentary crew to the storage facility to show the scale of the investigation. The scene at the laboratory was impressive and amazing. 267 pieces of physical evidence from the Molly Bish case were carefully preserved in brown paper bags, arranged on tall metal shelves in the cold room. Each bag was meticulously labeled with information about collection location, dates, and type of evidence. Sherry Mittelhauser, Forensic Support Division Manager at the laboratory, explained that all these items were related to the Molly Bish case. From small fabric pieces found at the scene, soil samples, to Molly's personal items like the backpack she carried on her final day. Detective Safford paid special attention to Molly's backpack, which she considered evidence number 1 in the case. What we carry in our backpacks or wallets says a lot about who we are, she explained the importance of understanding the victim. I think learning about the victim is a very important part of every case. Modern DNA technology had allowed investigators to reconsider evidence that previously couldn't be analyzed. New techniques could extract genetic information from very small or damaged samples, opening the possibility of finding new clues from old evidence. The waiting process for DNA results from Frank Sumner's son lasted over a year, creating extreme tension for the Bish family. Each passing day carried hope that they would finally get the answer they had been seeking for over 2 decades. Heather used this time to continue advocating for changes to Massachusetts law, particularly pushing for passage of Bill S-1595 on familial DNA. She worked with Senator Ann Goby and other legislators to ensure that Massachusetts would have the necessary legal tools to solve unsolved cases. I've been working on this familial DNA bill for about 2 years with the intention that it would lead us to the man in the white car, Heather shared with reporters. Familial DNA is being used in 14 other states, and the accuracy of this technology has brought impressive results in solving old cases. Dr. Anne Marie Myers, director of the Molly Bish Center and Forensic Criminology at Anna Maria College, was appointed by Governor Charlie Baker to the Forensic Science Oversight Board to review the familial DNA bill. She emphasized that this is proven science and Massachusetts needs to use this technology to bring resolution to victim families. While legal and scientific processes were underway, the Bish family continued to live with pain and waiting. They knew that DNA results could determine whether they would finally find justice for Molly. If the DNA matched, they would have the necessary evidence to confirm Frank Sumner Sr. as the perpetrator. If it didn't match, they would have to continue the search that seemed never ending. The story of the Molly Bish case during this period was not just about searching for a killer, but also about the development of forensic science, the power of social media in seeking justice, and the unwavering persistence of a family in the fight against injustice. August 2022 will forever be remembered as one of the most painful days in the Bish family's journey seeking justice. After more than a year of hopeful and anxious waiting, the DNA test results were finally announced. Heather Bish stood before her TikTok camera with a tired face and tear-filled eyes, announcing news that she knew would shatter the hopes of millions who had followed her family's story. The tests we've been waiting for over the past year have come back and do not match Frank Sumner, she said with a trembling voice. Once again, the Bish family had to face ultimate disappointment when a promising lead led to another dead end. Frank Sumner Jr.'s DNA did not match the evidence at the crime scene, meaning his father was not the perpetrator who had taken Molly's life. This news shocked not only the Bish family, but also the community that had believed they had finally found the answer. In her next TikTok video, Heather shared the decision to broaden the search, acknowledging that the road to seeking justice for Molly was still long and winding ahead. This disappointment also affected Frank Sumner Sr.'s family. Throughout the past year, they had endured suspicion and attacks from the public. Jackie, Frank's half-sister, described a year full of suffering when her family faced garbage being thrown on their lawn, people throwing objects at their car, and stigma from the community. "I want justice for the Bish family," Jackie said with tears in her eyes. "But I also believe that time and money have been wasted on an investigation that may be flawed." She emphasized that her brother, despite having a serious criminal record, had no history of crimes involving children or teenagers. In this context of disappointment, the Bish family decided not to give up, but instead found ways to transform their pain into a positive legacy that could help other families. In 2004, just 4 years after Molly disappeared, Maggie and John Bish established the Molly Bish Foundation, with the mission of protecting children and supporting families with missing loved ones. The Molly Bish Foundation quickly became one of the most influential nonprofit organizations in child protection in New England. They produced and distributed over 850,000 child identification kits throughout the region, each kit including detailed information about children and fingerprints, helping families prepare for emergency situations they hoped they would never have to face. But Molly's legacy didn't stop at distributing safety kits. Maggie Bish worked directly with Senator Ted Kennedy to bring the Amber Alert system to Massachusetts. This system, designed to quickly notify the public when children are abducted, has saved hundreds of children across the United States since its implementation. The Bish family also pushed for establishing Massachusetts Missing Children's Day, an annual Memorial Day aimed at raising awareness about child abduction issues and honoring the memory of missing children. This event was not just a Memorial Day, but also an opportunity for legislators, law enforcement agencies, and nonprofit organizations to discuss measures to improve child protection. One of the most important changes the Bish family pushed for was reforming how police handle missing children cases. Heather Bish spent years advocating for mandatory training for all local police officers on how to handle missing person cases, especially children and teenagers. When Molly disappeared, she was judged as a 16-year-old who had run away with her friends, Heather explained in an interview. "There was a lot of bias in how police handled the case. They didn't call my mother for 3 hours. 76% of children abducted by strangers are killed within the first 3 hours. So by the time we started looking for Molly, statistically, she might already have been dead." The expensive lesson from the Molly Bish case led to fundamental changes in missing person handling protocols throughout Massachusetts. Now, any report of a missing child is immediately treated as an emergency situation, eliminating the waiting period that previously could be fatal. The Molly Bish Foundation currently provides professional training courses for local police officers, teaching them how to recognize signs of child abduction, how to properly protect crime scenes, and most importantly, how to respond quickly and effectively during those crucial first hours. Meanwhile, Heather continued using the power of social media to maintain public interest in her sister's case. Her TikTok videos not only retold Molly's story, but also educated viewers about child safety issues, how to recognize dangerous situations, and the importance of reporting suspicious activities. Heather's efforts created a global community of millions following Molly Bish's story. Many of them were inspired to participate in child protection activities in their own communities, creating a positive ripple effect far beyond what the Bish family could have imagined. The Bish family's struggle also opened important discussions about the need to reform the forensic DNA system. Heather spent 2 years working with legislators to push for passage of Bill S-1595 on familial DNA in Massachusetts, a technology proven effective in 14 other states. Familial DNA is proven science, Senator Ann Goby, the bill's co-sponsor, explained. "We're saying use this proven science. Let's bring resolution to victim families and get the bad guys off the street." Familial DNA technology allows investigators to search for perpetrators' relatives when there are no direct results from the CODIS database. This could revolutionize how old cases are solved, especially cases like Molly Bish's, where unidentified DNA was found at the scene. In 2025, marking 25 years since Molly disappeared, the Bish family and Warren community organized a series of moving memorial events. The ceremony began at the cemetery where Molly was laid to rest, followed by a more formal ceremony at the center of Warren, and ended with a gathering at Commons Pond itself, where it all began. At the memorial service, Molly Bish stood before hundreds of people who had come to honor her daughter's memory. With an emotional but strong voice, she said, "I believe Molly's love and light have guided us through these 25 years. Today, we share our family's gratitude. Because of Molly, we have conquered what evil could not, because love is much stronger." Heather, standing beside her mother, shared personal emotions about the 25-year journey. "I feel my sister beside me. Because of Molly, I have become braver than I ever thought possible. I have faced my deepest fears. I have endured unimaginable pain, and I have survived." The investigation of the Molly Bish case continues under the direction of Detective Chelsea Safford and her team. With 267 pieces of physical evidence still carefully preserved and DNA technology constantly developing, hope for finding the truth remains alive in everyone's hearts. "None of us can bring Molly back," Detective Safford acknowledged, "but the best thing I can do is find out what happened. I will never stop trying." She and her team continue applying the latest technologies to reanalyze old evidence, hoping that someday science will provide the answer the Bish family has been seeking. The Worcester County District Attorney's Office continues to affirm their commitment. The Bish case investigation is active and ongoing. We encourage anyone with information related to this case to contact us. Nearly 8,000 tips have been reported since Molly went missing, and they continue to come in. Every call is carefully considered. Every piece of information is pursued with hope that it might be the final piece in this mysterious puzzle. Frank Sumner Sr. remains considered the only officially named person of interest in the case, despite DNA testing ruling him out. Prosecutor Early Jr. explained, "He's the only person of interest we've named, the only person of interest named in this case." Molly Bish's story has become more than an unsolved case. It has become a symbol of perseverance, hope, and the power of family love in the fight against darkness. Molly's legacy lives in every child protected by the changes her family pushed for, in every family better prepared for emergencies thanks to identification kits, and in every police officer better trained in handling missing person cases. Heather continues posting videos on TikTok, her voice echoing through cyberspace with a message that never changes. "Someone knows something, and someone knows who took Molly Bish's life. I will never give up. I will fight. Molly deserves justice." The tip line 508-453-7575 remains active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, waiting for the call that could bring justice to Molly Bish after 25 years of waiting. Meanwhile, the Bish family continues to live with the belief that someday the truth will be revealed and they will find the peace they have sought for over a quarter century. Molly Bish's story reminds us that behind every unsolved case is a real family with real pain and real love that never dies. It also shows that even in the darkness of crime, the light of love and hope can still shine, illuminating the path for others and creating lasting positive changes in society.